Welcome to Contemporary Retirement. Contemporary Retirement is a public interest program focused on the retirement community. Every program has segments on legal, financial, and health issues affecting the retirement community. Contemporary Retirement is sponsored in part by a major grant from the Family Heritage Trust Company.
Contemporary Retirement is sponsored by Family Heritage Trust Company. The Family Heritage Trust Company is an independent bank chartered trust company established by local professionals to provide fiduciary services including fee-based investment advice, trust services, retirement planning, and tax planning. The Family Heritage Trust Company is committed to client service in our communities. For more information, call the Family Heritage Trust Company at 301-631-5900.
Contemporary Retirement is sponsored in part by a grant from R. Thomas Murphy & Associates, P.C. R. Thomas Murphy & Associates is one of Franklin County's leading law firms, emphasizing estate, trust, elder law, and medical assistance planning.
Welcome to the Is It Legal feature on Contemporary Retirement. Is It Legal focuses on the legal issues affecting the retirement community. With me today is Tom Murphy from the R. Thomas Murphy Law Firm with offices in Waynesboro, Chambersburg, and McConnellsburg. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Good morning.
Tom, we've been doing a sequence on estate planning versus elder law. Estate planning was traditionally about avoiding taxes, almost completely irrelevant in our society today.
Yeah, the numbers have changed dramatically, and so for most families, they're not going to be subject to federal estate tax.
Maryland has no inheritance tax between husband and wife, no inheritance tax between parents and children. The exemption level is not as high as the feds, but it's still $4 million with a couple of $8 million. Virtually nobody pays a Maryland estate tax.
Exactly. Pennsylvania has some lower level inheritance taxes at 4.5% to 15%, but again, no estate tax other than for what would hit you on a federal level.
Which essentially nobody pays the estate tax there either.
Yeah, very few, if any.
And so the reality of this is, though, is a bunch of what is perceived amateur estate planning tools does not work for the inheritance tax in either Maryland or Pennsylvania. The state long since figured out how to collect taxes on those.
Yeah, you're dealing with some pros, and so they've seen it all, and they've got ways to deal with it, and people walk into these traps unnecessarily.
And of course, we spent the last several weeks talking about a lot of the strategies everybody wants to use to avoid probate interferes with government benefits for nursing homes. And so people trying to avoid in Maryland, a structural cost of probate is less than 1%. And there is no taxes in most estates. And what they're doing to avoid probate many times costs more than the probate fee that they would have had, but more importantly, interferes with their ability to qualify for government benefits.
Well, certainly. And then on top of it, depending on what they decide is a great tool to use, they inadvertently create bigger problems and other taxes and issues that didn't need to exist.
So we have to say, well, okay, Mike, you talked me out of this trust, even though I think I should have one because my neighbor told me I should have one, and I read it on the internet. So I'm going to own all of my accounts joint with my children, so there'll be no probate.
Well, exactly.
Now that's a wonderful negative impact in Pennsylvania. What happens there?
Well, not only when you pass do the children pay tax on half of it, but if the kids die or they get divorced or become disabled or don't pay their child support, you're losing your money or getting taxed on your own money.
I actually have a lady right now paying her son's unpaid child support order because his name was on her savings account so that she could avoid probate.
Yep, I see it every year and it's just mind-boggling, and it just shocks the heck out of the client who says, oh, no one told me this.
Well, one of the problems is these beneficiary designations. I'm going to avoid probate. Everybody knows it's awful. Well, they named 3 kids on a payable on death. Well, most of these financial institutions, if one of your children predeceases you, they're out. It does not go to their children.
Right.
Yet most of the wills say, in the event a child predeceases you, the grandchildren take their parents' share.
Right, and then depending on the size of the institution you're dealing with, it is in some cases a lot faster for an executor to go in there and get hold of that money than to do the paperwork to get that money paid out to the designated beneficiary.
And then there's a problem because sometimes there is an inheritance tax due on that money when it's going to a non-lineal descendant, or in your case, it doesn't matter who it is, and that beneficiary has an obligation in some instances to pay the inheritance tax. Not easy to collect it.
Well, exactly, and so then you get Department of Revenue chasing you down, and worse yet, in many cases, we'll see the children be willing to pay and loan and do things to the estate, but they're not getting credit for that. They're getting taxed on the gross distribution and not the net distribution.
You know, and we're not proponents of any unnecessary difficulty in dealing with the estate, but when you have these disparate numbers hitting things and requirement of cooperation, and you put money on the table, you put in-laws on the table, you put ne'er-do-wells on the table, you know, you are just asking for a problem.
Yeah, and we always break it down to statistical risk. You know, if it's you and your spouse, we can do the math there. But if you start adding children and everybody else to things, now you're just scrambling those numbers, and we have no way of calculating the risk.
And then we also deal with the fact that sometimes you have a grandchild who's disabled.
Right.
Your child predeceases you and that grandchild ends up taking, you've just fouled up their government benefits. You have to look beyond what's dead in front of you.
Exactly. There's so many risk factors there where you want to have a lot more controls. You just don't want to throw it to the wind and hope that everybody and everything works out well.
Well, you know, our assumption is Murphy's Law, Tom Murphy's Law. It can go wrong. It sooner or later will go wrong.
Right.
And, you know, many of the things that they're trying to avoid are just so inconsequential anyway. It's just not necessary.
Yeah, and that's the point. You know, part of the advantage of speaking to someone who can help you evaluate those risks is you can see what the pros and cons are. And if you just do it blindly, you have no idea what can go wrong.
Tom, as always, thanks for taking time to appear on the program.
You're welcome.
More from Contemporary Retirement after these messages.
Few things in life are as important as family. Leave your insurance worries to us, Wright, Gardner. Call or visit our website to learn how we can make insurance simple and more affordable.
Every life that meets its end leaves a heart for love to mend. Sister, brother, family, friends are left to carry on. When the loss seems more than you can bear, it's nice to know that we'll be there at Douglas A. Fiery Funeral Home. We care.
Call Ed Lowe to help put your mind at ease.
Welcome to special guest feature on Contemporary Retirement. This segment focuses on various issues which are of importance to the retirement community. With me today is Paul Sweeney, President of Quality First Insurance Agency. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Good morning, Mike.
You know, it's pretty interesting what's going on in our society today. There's really a lack of understanding of a lot of the legislation that's going on. And you and I have an irony, as you're much more negative on the Affordable Care Act than I am. But when we have our over 65 clients talking about the Affordable Care Act relative to how it affects them, they're essentially universally wrong as to their beliefs.
Yeah, the people don't really understand how it affected them, or they just assume that it affected them in a negative way.
Because everybody's complaining about it. But the reality is 98% of the Affordable Care Act had to do with people under 65. And while their kids might have a legitimate complaint about it, people over 65, there's only one basic attribute to the Affordable Care Act, and it's positive for people over 65, not negative.
Right, and what we're talking about is the future elimination of something called the donut hole or the coverage gap.
All right, so we have Part D, that's the prescription plan, and you and I have hammered for years that except for a person already covered by a government benefits plan or an employer plan, I have yet to hear a justification for the failure to enroll in Part D that I think is valid.
The prescription drug program by Medicare, which is called the PDP, is a program that is actually subsidized by the federal government. So it costs less than what it's probably costs the most employers to provide that benefit. And if you don't have prescription benefits through a retiree plan, you really need to enroll in that plan.
And one of the problems is that people say, well, I'm not taking any prescriptions, and they don't understand that you could have an acute event that could result in massive prescription drug costs that have absolutely nothing to do with whether or not you take a high blood pressure medication.
It happens all the time. You know, somebody is diagnosed with a new condition, suddenly they've got to take a medication that could be very expensive, and if they don't have a prescription drug plan in place, they can't just buy it at that point. There are only certain times that you can enroll in a prescription drug program.
And then there are penalties for the failure to enroll timely, and there's time frames as to when it'll become effective.
And there's a variety of plans that are available. So you can pay a very low premium just to have a plan. It might have a deductible associated with it, but you can get a plan that's very affordable.
We tell people take no maintenance drugs. It's dirt obvious. Take the cheapest plan out there, because you have no idea whether when you need one or not it's going to be covered by any of the plans, but it eliminates the penalty and leaves you in a position to be able to acquire it in the future at a substantially lower cost. Now, we never said Part D was good. What we said, it provided reasonable coverage for a reasonable price so that people could get coverage. But one of the attributes of the plan is it was originally designed, it had a period of initial coverage, and then it had what was called the donut hole. What did that mean?
Well, technically it was called the coverage gap, which is a period of time where there was not any coverage at all for any prescription drug coverage. Generally, most of the plans, I'm going to round the numbers off, covered about your first $3,000 worth of medications. Once you entered the coverage gap or the donut hole, you were on your own until you spent well over $4,000 on medication
So
costs.
oftentimes around $3,000. And then what happened?
Then what happened, there was a catastrophic benefit that would kick in. So if you spent over a certain amount in a year, at a calendar year from January 1 through December 31, then it would kick in and pay 95% of the cost of your medication at that point.
Of course, a lot of seniors legitimately did not like that donut hole, but a lot of the times they lost focus. It was still dramatically better than what we had prior to 2006.
Oh, because there was nothing before 2006, so yeah, it was.
Other than some junky plans that were just sort of trading dollars with the insurance company. This is real coverage.
Right. Now, what's happened now is, as part of the Affordable Care Act, and it's been implemented since 2012, there's been a slow elimination of the donut hole or the coverage gap. And it was designed to end in 2020.
The coverage gap was going to
The coverage gap was going to end in 2020.
So, we have a whole bunch of seniors that are jumping up and down, yelling and screaming about repeal of the Affordable Care Act, not realizing it would have had a very adverse effect on them had they gotten their way.
Right, but there's also been as part of the new budget, in 2019 we've got some very exciting news. The coverage gap is actually going to end a year sooner. It's going to end January 1 of 2019.
So all of this stuff back and forth, when you have 1,000-page bills and nobody's read any of them, they vote on them. I have no idea what these things say. And unfortunately, the media focuses on whatever, gets people to watch their show, not necessarily great information.
Right, and it's surprising to me that this was actually passed in February of this year. I've really heard nothing about it until recently, and now it's going to have an effect on everybody that has a prescription drug plan with Medicare, and it's going to have a positive effect.
Paul, as always, thanks for taking time to appear on the show.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
More from Contemporary Retirement after these messages.
Tranquility at Fredericktown Assisted Living and Memory Care provides a warm, home-like atmosphere that promotes daily life enrichment. At Tranquility, our medical director is a geriatric physician. Our professionals support and understand the various stages associated with Alzheimer's and dementia. We have on-site physical, occupational, and speech therapists, as well as around-the-clock licensed nurses. For more information, give Tranquility at Fredericktown a call today, because everyone deserves great care. Let us do the caregiving so you and your loved one can embrace life again.
All right, let's get this show on the road. Ma'am, give me a good push.
Hang on, just 1 minute.
Ma'am, I need you to push right now.
Honey, you really need to push.
It's time.
Just hold on a minute.
No, right now. One push, ma'am. One push.
Just one more bid on HurleyAuctions.com.
If you haven't visited HurleyAuctions.com, you don't know what you're missing. Whether you're buying or selling, antique cars, tractors, boats, or real estate, you can do it all at HurleyAuctions.com.
Get to know Dr. Carrie Hesley at Diagnostic Imaging Services.
What I find most rewarding is caring for women through our Women's Imaging Center. We have a caring staff that will ease patients through an ultrasound, bone densitometry, breast biopsy, or mammogram. Our health team is sensitive to emotions involved in women's imaging and understands that every woman is at risk for breast cancer. Providing the community with a center that is so dedicated to breast health and the imaging needs of women is something special.
DIS Women's Imaging Center, providing women with progressive care.
Welcome to Contemporary Health Scene. Contemporary Health Scene focuses on the health issues affecting the retirement community. With me today is Gabrielle Henry, Director of Greenfield Assisted Living. Welcome to the show, Gabby.
Good morning, Mr. Day.
Gabby, one of the interesting things about this medical service model today is the government is trying to get out of the nursing home business, and they cannot get out of the nursing home business by putting the sickest of the sick patients out. So how can they reduce that nursing home population?
I believe that they can reduce the nursing home population by adding more resources to assisted living communities. We have some third-party assistance that we use for resources to help accommodate those specific needs that most assisted livings aren't able to accommodate.
Well, what's happened here also is the fact is, if you asked 5 years ago if an assisted living facility would, for instance, have physical therapy delivered within the premises, what would have classically been the answer?
That they would not have that resource available to them back then.
And the government really was a problem in terms of that, because Medicare wasn't reimbursing for that physical therapy that was delivered within assisted living, which ended up being counterproductive to the government's objective in reducing the nursing home population. So today you can get it there and it is reimbursed.
Yes, it is. So at Greenfield Senior Living specifically, we have third-party resources that we use. Baker therapy with physical therapy, occupational therapy. They come into our community and provide those services.
So if the diagnosis is appropriate, then Medicare and many private health insurers are now picking that up, which in the past would have automatically resulted in a nursing home admission, is part of the government's goal to reduce that nursing home population.
Yes, that is true. So within assisted living, we have resources for physical therapy. It's not as strenuous as it would be in a skilled nursing setting. However, a lot of our residents don't require that strenuous physical therapy or occupational therapy, maybe 2 or 3 times a week just to continue on. And it's also a great resource for after residents or prospects come in after rehabilitation in a nursing home. They can still come into assisted living, have that safe, stimulating environment, and still go through the physical therapy, maybe just a little less vigorous.
And one of the challenges here is that we know hospitals are discharging people who are not ready to go home in any way, shape, or form, so they're going to rehab. But we're also seeing the government, for cost-containing purposes, insurance companies for cost-containing purposes, are then discharging people out of rehab who are still not in a position to go home.
Yes, that is true. I have seen it myself. If someone is not changing or prospering from the rehabilitation after a hospital stay, then they discharge that resident. And then I ask families to be proactive. So if your loved one is going to the hospital, they do require some rehabilitation, be proactive in looking for an assisted living that does offer a few assistance.
And so part of the challenge here is that many times these people are still not in a position to take care of themselves yet, and not to say that it has to be a permanent admission. So in the instance that we're describing there, that may not be a permanent admission to your assisted living facility, but might be a month or 2 months while they're still going through that therapy that they need in order to become independent again.
Yes, and that's where we have our respite stay. Our respite stay is a flat rate each day, and it's a 30-day minimal, but we can work with families if you need 2-3 weeks.
And of course that also becomes a benefit too for those family members who are providing care for an older person, but people sometimes lose sight of the fact that that person sometimes has their own health issues, a hip replacement, knee replacement, where they are not physically able to provide the support for that person in the older generation. So that older person might find themselves there for a month or 2 while that person is rehabilitating.
Yes, we've had families undergo that where the main caretaker was undergoing some health concerns on his or her end and sent in their loved one into our facility for respite stay. A lot of our respite stays do end up becoming long-term just because they see the resources and how available and we are to the families an open door policy.
And of course we have the same issue. Oftentimes the spouse is supporting another spouse and they're in the same generation, but that the caregiver's spouse has their own health issues and they're really not going to be in a position to support the spouse that's in greater need of care.
Yes, and I do see it a lot, and it's very unfortunate. Once again, I ask families to be proactive. If you start seeing your loved one, if you have parents out there where one loved one is having dementia or memory cognitive impairment issues, really look out for the caregiver, because it is a 24/7 job.
And one of the things that we encourage people to do is not wait until the ship is sinking, to start looking around, start exploring some of the resources that are available to you. And many times people are shocked because they think that it's one thing or that you only deliver one service model, and they really don't understand the breadth of the services that are available.
Yes, so with our community specifically, it is the perfect community to age in place. Whereas the dementia progresses and your activities of daily living needs become more physical needs, you're able to stay in our community and age in place.
And most of the time, anytime during the course of the normal business week, you can show up almost any time and get a tour.
Yes, you can show up almost any time and get a tour, and you will receive a tour by myself or one of our hands-on-deck staff members.
And if you want a weekend one, you got to schedule an appointment, but you could get that as well.
Yes, we are available on weekends as well.
So Gabby, what's your phone number?
Our phone number is 301-766-9202.
Thanks for appearing on the program.
Thank you again, Mr. Day.
More from Contemporary Retirement after these messages.
The Community Foundation strives to be a forward-thinking organization.
We are assessing needs, working with donors to see things differently,
so that Frederick County can be its best. It's a wonderful place for all of us to live, work, and play.
We look forward to addressing the future needs of the community.
Visit frederickcountygives.org and learn how you can start to see things differently too.
Albright, Crumbacher, Mal & Eitel are a full-service firm that provides elder care services including managing incoming bills, bill payment, depositing checks, balancing bank statements, and preparing, planning, and filing personal tax returns. Put your mind at ease and call us today.
Welcome to the Making Sense feature on Contemporary Retirement. Making Sense focuses on the financial issues affecting the retirement community. With me today is Christian Wright, President of Wright, Gardner Insurance. Welcome to the show, Christian.
Thanks, Michael.
Once again, just a quick overview. I'm sure our viewers are beginning to get weary of it. What's the difference between an independent agent and a captive agent?
Okay, an independent agent is not beholden to any one insurance company. They represent a multitude of insurance companies, and a captive agent typically represents just one insurance company.
And they're actually an employee of that insurance company. So there's a shift in responsibility as to who is their duty is to.
Correct.
Now, I'm not saying they're bad people or anything else, but there is a subtle difference.
There's definitely a difference.
Now, you know, one of the interesting things about independent agents is dealing with various types of risks. Now, one risk that we deal with all the time is homeowners policies, whether or not they cover domestic workers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they don't. They don't.
Now, who is a domestic worker?
Okay, so a domestic worker could be someone who cleans your home, someone who does yard work, someone who
an unlicensed contractor.
An unlicensed contractor, someone who provides some in-home care.
Right.
So
my policy says that I'm covered for liability, but is that a liability coverage under a homeowner's policy?
No, it's not. It's not. So if you're actually paying someone for a service, they're in your employ. Now, we can have that argument all day long. We're not talking about letting the IRS know this. The rub is they fall down, they hurt themselves, you don't do something that contributes to their injury, okay? Who's going to pay for their medical payments and their lost wages?
It's not going to be your homeowner's policy.
Absolutely not. There's an
and
absolute
the fact
exclusion.
is that many states, and Maryland in particular, is very hard on essentially finding any person working in the house as an employee.
Right.
And once they're an employee, your homeowner's policy specifically excludes it, and now you would be responsible for those medical expenses.
Absolutely, and you're going to have to pay out of pocket. Definitely the medical expenses. You know, if you're paying the person cash and it's not being reported, you know, there's a whole lot of issues. So the reality is they're an employee, and there's a way to fix that problem.
And then, of course, the person says, but their health insurance will pay for that injury.
No, health insurance has, again, a specific exclusion. Devil's in the details. Has that exclusion that excludes work-related injuries.
But my policy says all risk.
Okay, so all risk is never all risk. There is nothing as far as an absolute in insurance. So, you know, these attorneys that write these insurance policies, Michael, they cause a lot of problems. But all risks means that it covers everything except those things that are specifically excluded.
Workers'
so you have
comp.
to pay attention to those. For example, workers' compensation.
How about flood?
Among flood too, absolutely. Flood's excluded. So there, again, there's a way to fix that. You know.
Now, there's several places you can get flood insurance. You can go through the federal program, but you and I, interestingly enough, came up with a problem when I wanted flood insurance on my house.
Right, right. The federal flood insurance program is good for certain situations. I'm going to tell you something, though, and your viewers may or may not know this. December 1st of every year, we get notices that the National Flood Program is not going to be reinstated. Okay, so there's always that problem, but there's a lot of other issues. But no, you don't have to. It's a fallacy to think that you have to buy it through the federal government. There are insurance companies that write, it's called write your own flood insurance. So.
Well, it's interesting. My house sits on top of a hill, so people say, why in the world would you need flood insurance? You need 40 days, 40 nights, but why would I need flood insurance?
So again, another myth in insurance is if I live near water, I need flood insurance, but if I live on a hill, I don't. The reality is, no, flood insurance covers inundation of water. Okay,
so that means if my gutter is blocked up with leaves and that basement floods because it overruns and runs into the basement, would that be covered by a standard homeowner's
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And that, again, is where an independent agent can advise you, provide that coverage for you. But yeah, I mean, flood insurance has a very broad definition, so water intrusion is specifically excluded from that homeowner's policy.
So that outside stairwell with a drain, if that drain gets blocked up because of rain, it's not going to be covered by the homeowners.
No, it's not going to be covered. It's not going to be covered. So again, but here's the thing: the flood insurance on a home on a hill is not that expensive because the likelihood is very limited now to an inundation of rain if it's not proper, drainage and things like that. There's definitely a reason to carry flood insurance. Everyone should consider it, and you should have it priced before you make your decision to say, absolutely, I don't need it.
And of course, then you get into this mixed one involving sewer backup because some policies cover, some don't.
Well, here's the thing. So water and sewer backup, sump pump backup is a very small coverage, and it depends on the insurance companies. Some provide $5,000, some provide $1,000, some provide very little. So you can't simply rely on that.
Christian, as always, thanks for taking time to appear on our program.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you from Contemporary Retirement.
Remember a more carefree time? Leave your insurance worries to us, Wright Gardner. Call or visit our website to learn how we can make insurance simple and more affordable.
These days, it seems like everything's online, and filling out claim forms and receiving and paying bills online isn't always easiest. That's why we at Quality First Insurance encourage you to just give us a call. Let us help.
Hi there, I'm Paul Sweeney with Quality First Insurance, and it's still just this simple. Our offices are open every weekday where you'll be able to call and speak to real, live people.
No detail was missed. I'm so glad that I turned to Quality First Insurance.
I've recommended Quality First Insurance to my friends who've been just as satisfied.
If you're not happy with what you're paying for Medigap, or more importantly, not happy with your service, give us a try. We're locally owned, and we take the time to provide you with the best. We are Quality First Insurance, and our mission is to provide quality products to quality people. Pick up the phone and give us a call today at 800-745-1411.